The Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry, presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Radio Free Larry.
All right, here we go again. I think of all the statements made yesterday about the impeachment hearings, Don Jr. had the right frame of mind. It's ludicrous. It's idiotic. It's a farce. It's the craziest, most lunatic thing that you can watch probably in a decade or more. I don't know if any government outside of governments we know that operate that way, such as China, unfortunately, North Korea, we're trying to get them forward of that. However, North Korea, Russia, Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, that's what's going on there. A fabricated scenario that has such extreme ramifications to everyone going on as if it's a laudable patriotic activity. And as I've identified, that is where and why they call themselves and their criminal spycraft operators that have stolen the crown jewels of the CIA and are, in essence, hostily taking over the United States in a criminal fashion, as well as committing genocide and murder. Psychological warfare murder is genocide. Psychological warfare murder is a form of genocide based upon how they use it. So, again, that is their cover story, that they're answering a higher call. So, the law itself, the Constitution itself, is no longer the higher calling. Now, of course, I've explained about that with God. I've explained that. I've explained about it. And it's clear. The higher calling exists. But yet, if you're not within law and the Constitution, you're not in a higher calling. You're in sedition. You're in espionage because you're engaged in psychological warfare activity and spycraft activity. You're in treason. That's who they are. That's who they've been. They're trying to get the president so burned out that he won't do anything other than protect himself. And at certain points, that's what you have to do, and you can't get on with your life. I explained you don't even get to the doctors you want to get to because they're combating you in every moment. Every moment, there's a psychological warfare operation that you have to break through, which includes, as I told you, spiritual, demonic activity. They're demons, devils, witches, sorcerers, and antichrist. No matter how many times they go to church or say they pray for the president, because they don't pray for the president, they spell him downward. So there are some things here that I wanted to go over very quickly, and I know Wikipedia can be in political issues can be slanted. However, if we go to basic information without speaking about people, it's no better or worse than any other encyclopedia when we get to factual information that really doesn't have too much of a political ramification. I want to start with predicate crime. I'm going to read this here from the Wikipedia article. Predicate crime is a legal phrase that comes from the term predicate, which bears a definition of to proclaim or to declare. It is an illegal action that opposes the public order and against the law in law practices predicate crime is part of the criminal law and is called predicate offense, which refers to a crime that is a component of a larger crime. The crime will not have a large impact on its own, although will have a more impact on society if it took part in a larger crime. The Organization of Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, known as RICO, was made to target the predicate criminals such as criminal shift and the deep state. According to RICO, predicate acts include bribery, blackmail, extortion, fraud, theft, money laundering, counterfeiting, and illegal betting or operating a betting ring. Crimes may be justified as predicate acts to a larger crime if they have a similar purpose of the larger crime. Deep state has tons and tons of predicate crimes. Opening that border is a predicate crime to drug offenses. They'll always tell you the con-trick story, as every criminal enterprise. The mafia always had a story as to what they were doing, a cover for that. But it was always a lie. So what Schiff is doing is empowering criminal enterprise of the deep state. And I say criminal enterprise of the deep state because there are many. I guess I should have said criminal enterprises. He's not only empowering the face value deep state, and that's what they try to cookie cutter us into. That's where you will find people that will parallel the argument about what the deep state is and how it shouldn't exist, and then they'll steer it into something that's only going against the president, or where it's something that only includes a small number of people, such as Comey, Mueller, and a couple other. They didn't even put Mueller really in. They'll put Comey and maybe McCabe in, and of course they assume that role, and they do their part and get paid for doing their part also, as being the guy that's going to be, or the gal that's going to be taking the fall, but yet not take the fall in many cases. So the predicate crime here is the impeachment hearing itself, but yet there are many predicate crimes. It's not only the impeachment hearing, and it is a form of extortion. It does involve money laundering. If you were to research all those funds they're using to do this, you would find criminal activity of a drug nature. But the chain is very, very, very long on how they move their money. FBI's not interested because they're part of the deep state. So again, we're dealing with a similar issue that Mexico is dealing with. However, our issue is it's the same but different because we haven't degraded that far. It's still psychological warfare and spycraft. Mexico is operating within the United States, psychological warfare and spycraft at a CIA level, and it includes government people in Mexico. Now, it's not every government person, but that's what's going on. So again, Schiff is operating a criminal enterprise, and Schiff is engaged in a predicate crime that includes narcotics distribution at the Mexican cartel level. It includes narcotics distribution at the Mexican cartel level. Schiff is representing the Mexican cartels in that impeachment hearing. Criminal Schiff is representing the Mexican cartels in that impeachment hearing. There's no doubt whatsoever. Don't let them fool you. Don't let them steer you away from that thought. The Democrats, the deep state, people that work in the CIA, that work in the State Department, that are there testifying, are representing Mexican cartels. Not every Mexican cartel. That's where the scam comes in, and the cover story, and the game that the NNNs play. There are cartels that they do not represent, and they will be arrested. There's even cells within certain cartels that will be arrested, so you can't figure out which cartel necessarily it is. So even the bosses within the cartels will sacrifice people to the government so that it looks like they're actually being investigated and arrested. Meanwhile, the big boss makes billions and billions of dollars. And then they launder that money back to these whistleblower funds, et cetera. And it's very difficult because, like I told you, they'll give you them a nonprofit money over here, and then they'll spend money over there. So again, where is the money coming from? It's a long chain, and then you have people within the uh, organizations that have no direct link to George Soros other than they receive money working for George Soros because spycraft communication has told them what they're to do. They've been in a long time receiving those messages. So that's what's going on here. We should know that. We should know that it is RICO. And what they're doing is they engage in this psychological projection that you are the ones that are engaged in RICO. You are the ones that are the despot. And then you move away from that terminology. And I was wondering, yesterday I had the question and I got my answer. It's like, why are they not as aggressive as they were in terminology? A few people are, because they're being psychologically operated against it. It's a natural human reaction. What they say is, but if they launch 150 operations against you, and they've done that, I'm telling you right now, there are direct and indirect operations, and it numbers in the thousands upon thousands every day. And they will affect you, let's say 150 of those operations. Somewhere in there, they're going to get somewhere. So again, the sheer magnitude and money that is in the deep state is what's driving that psychological warfare to affect each person. And you've seen the changes in personality. And you've seen that people can no longer exist in a well manner and will do whatever they're triggered to do to a point. And I'm not saying this again. When I bring this up, just because I'm wearing an NRA hat has nothing to do with it. But this is the problem with that type of activity within the United States, and that's why they're trying to take the guns away. You can only do it to a certain point, and then people will overthrow the government. So the deep state has been doing this over the years, and I've warned them, and you'll watch them do an about face when they discover I'm right. What they'll do is they'll go out and they'll monitor the internet traffic, and they'll find that the idea to overthrow the government is increasing. So they kind of reverse it a little bit and then try it again later. So again, as we stand right now, there is an increase to overthrow the government. And I do that as a psychic, as a seer, and as a law enforcement officer based upon my training and experience. And my experience is more than my training. I've always told you that. People haven't decided to train me in very much at all. The only person I really give credit for any attempt to train me was Matt Burke. And he was a well person that didn't play that game, and he got jammed a couple times by the deep state. I didn't know what it was, and I was his partner, so I got jammed by default. We were kind of at each other's throats for a day or two in there, but he eventually was promoted, per se, not promoted, but he went into the fugitive squad to get away from it, and then that made his life. So he was well after he went through that trial, and that's what God can accept. If you're going to attack somebody, God expects it not to exceed a certain point, and there's supposed to be a up, similar to what we see in Job's life, and they're trying to stumble me here. I'll heal it. Yeah, healed. Whoa. If you look at Job, you'll see what God expects in these trials that people go through. Anything outside of that or anything less than that, God does not accept. Period, especially from Christians. Remember, a lot of these people are claiming to be Christians. So it's kind of a God gotchas. So we go back to the idea that the deep state is a predicate crime to a multitude of criminal activities. And it is a form of terrorism. It is a psychological warfare terrorism, and it does murder. I don't care how many times you fought ISIS. You created ISIS because you're incompetent at a minimum. I don't know if you had any other plans to steer anything else using it, but you're incompetent. So you created ISIS. You're incompetent. You caused 9/11. Everybody knows this. They don't want to say it. That's fine. But they're not worth a hoot if they don't realize what the 9/11 Commission said. The 9/11 Commission said it in a way that it should have been said back when they wrote the report. Now we're more than a decade later, and it's even worse and still happening. Essentially, the deep state caused 9/11. What the 9/11 Commission saw was the markers of the anarchistic activity of the deep state within government. Again, we've never gotten forward of what caused 9/11. Again, the causation of 9/11 was pretty big. It took about a decade of bungles for it to happen. Again, that is real. There's no way that we should have spent more than a few more years after the Rockman trial with unlocked cockpit doors. That's just one of the things that caused it. I can't say all of them because I'm not really restricted from saying it, but I do have an ethical process, a decision-making process that I went through within myself with God, and I will not reveal specific information I have unless it's in the news or something like that or readily available. Unless it's directly affected my life and I was victimized by the deep state, which I've spoken about at length. They're not the only people. The people I spoke about are the contact people that were around me. They're not all the people. This thing's in the thousands upon thousands of people. And no, it's not because I'm on the internet, but they used that as an excuse. And eventually I was on the internet. There's nothing I could have ever done to do anything better than I did. In other words, just walking off and starting a life anew was not an option. Because I knew what they did to Jonathan Luna. By default, that's why this happened. At a certain point, Jonathan Luna was dead. Whether it's murder or suicide, it was caused by the deep state. And they had been doing it to me for, at that point, more than 8 years, I imagine. And it could have been longer, I told you that. I don't know when somebody just came into my life and said, let's do this guy, and just every year, every day, every month, every year, they're doing additional things. What they can do to destroy somebody's life, liberty, happiness, to cause crime, to cause immorality, to cause disability, to cause narcotization, to cause alcoholism, to cause sexual addiction. And it's caused by CIA level technology, but it includes KGB technology, Chinese secret police type technology, and it also includes those entities. Our people in government have been communicated to by foreign governments to take out government employees. You see how that works? Hansons are everywhere. Mueller is a Hanson. Mueller was a Hanson, but he's a spycraft Hanson. He never made contact with the Russians, as far as I know, which means he never made physical contact and received remuneration. The rest are receiving promotions. In other words, the Chinese and the Russians will get you promoted to director if they believe they can trust you. Even if you arrest 2 or 3 of their spies, they don't care. If you're decimating the U.S. government, they'll sacrifice a couple spies. And what happens when we arrest their spies? They go back home and they become famous and rich. So what do they care? You spend 6 months in a U.S. jail, a year, 5 years at the most, a day. I don't even think anybody ever spent 5 years, did they? They just get traded off. So the big thing is that they need Mueller in there as a director to take out all those employees that Louis Gohmert was speaking about. Congressman Gohmert had a list of things that Mueller was engaged in. That's what the Chinese and the Russians had him do. Now, CIA may have been also part of that influence, or not may, was part of that influence. But somewhere in that chain were people working for Russia, working for China, working for the European Union to take out government employees that would not toe the deep state line, which means become criminal and corrupt, or at least accept it, and wouldn't be promoted. Now, I don't know if I would be promoted. The Marshal Service is so insane, but what I didn't realize is I eventually could have went somewhere else and had a real career instead of a bunch of criminal hoodlums playing their games. and whammying everybody's mind with demonic spells, as well as psychological warfare to enslave them to do the work while they ran off and partied and got promoted and everything else. But yet, they're still part of that Mueller machine of criminal activity, of Chinese and Russian influence, so on and so forth. So that's a reality. The predicate crime technology has to be used when looking at the deep state because it's so big. And of course, it's very wide, which means where does that chain end? Where do we get to that criminal enterprise when it's all criminal enterprise in reality? Because it's all this predicate crime effectuating narcotics distribution, effectuating a psychological warfare terrorist operation. They are terrorists. What they're doing to President Trump is they're attempting to terrorize him. Now, what level they can, they will. If they were allowed to walk into the White House and shoot the president, Adam Schiff would do it. He has no control within himself. He's a sick son of a gun. He should have never been allowed anywhere near a government office. But yet, who put him in? Chinese, Russians. How did he know what to do? Shadow communication. Manchurian candidates are everywhere, but yet it's a little bit different than that basic idea. He's an idiot. Look at Adam Schiff. He's the biggest piece of garbage idiot you can imagine doing what he's doing. In other words, anybody else could have took that impeachment hearing and did something with it. I mean, look at the guy. He's a mess. What in the Hades is he doing there? The Chinese put him in. The Russians put him in. EU put him in. Corrupt UK people put him in. That's what's going on in our government. You're not electing somebody that you're electing. You're being led to elect people. And the question is, how much has law enforcement investigations fallen as far as ballot box stuffing? It seemed to me, and I don't know for sure, Pam Bondi was a little bit frustrated with her law enforcement entities when she needed some things investigated. Which means I don't think she was trusting who they were any longer. But see, then she gets moved along and somebody else is there and they walk around and play their royalty games because they've never been a Hollywood star before in their life. And now they're in Florida as the Hollywood star. So they're going to go after a single police officer and show you how he's the only one responsible. And the FBI and the Chinese secret police and the Russians had nothing to do with what happened in Parkland, right? I'll tell you, they did everything because they're putting people in our country that allow Parkland to exist because they know how to degrade our nation. And they do it with people like Adam Schiff, people like Director Wray. Director Wray was created by the global community. He shouldn't be anywhere near that agency. He's a loser. He's a Manchurian director. The nation's gone. There's nothing left. Wake up. So again, predicate crimes. Predicate crimes are very important to look at as to what they're actually doing. And you need to breach that subject as to what are you doing by opening our borders. We know what the effects are. We know how it's empowering the cartels in Mexico to even take over more of Mexico. Nothing to do with more, except I'm explaining it to you. So again, what are we looking at? What are we really looking at open borders? We're looking at politicians that are supporting drug distribution. And those funds are making it back to their coffers, and they know it. So if I look at a car dealership in California, I would find a ton of drug money buying huge cars, buying big houses. So who are those real estate people? Who are those auto dealers? They are glad that narcotics distribution exists because it pays their $10,000 a month mortgage, $5,000 a month mortgage. You see, that's why things are so expensive in California. One is the degraded society and how much money they spend on further degrading it. They don't know how to fix anything. Two, you have so much narcotic money, illegal funds flowing into California because they won't be investigated. There's a small portion. They're investigated like in any criminal enterprise government. Same thing as in Mexico. I explained it to you earlier. So if somebody's a billionaire and they're enriching people to be millionaires through criminal funds that look like it's legitimate because they're doing some legitimate business, where are we? That's why you can't afford anything in California, because they have drug money and you don't. That's the bottom line. And that drug money will say whether you get VA benefits or government benefits also, because the person that gives you benefits is working for the deep state. And they will be, at a minimum, shadow influence to do something, but will have direct meetings with people that will pay them to deny you benefits. Because why? They want to have that same life. And how do they bring them in? They start giving them that life. And then they start taking that life away. So to maintain that life, they'll do anything. And that's what you see Adam Schiff doing. He's a criminal. Don't trust him. Find a way to put him in prison. Well, again, after I say such things, I say no violence. Don't be violent. The deep state wants you to be violent. They create mass shooters using CIA technology, Russian technology, EU technology of a psychological warfare nature, Chinese secret police, Chinese intelligence technology. They're working side by side to enslave the entire world to that 10%. Well, it's not the 10% of the uber wealthy. There's people in the middle class today that are in the upper middle class because of criminal activity. So they're making what, $90,000 a year because they're criminals. So again, don't let them steer you into that class warfare. People that aren't that uber rich are doing this. You can't, again, the director can't do it without street soldiers. The director can be as corrupt as he wants, but if he doesn't have people on the street that are corrupt, then he can't do anything. So the whole entire agencies are gone, at least some sort of criminal cell framework. So again, it's not the uber rich, it's not the poor, it's not the middle class, it's all of the above. It's who it is. See, again, if I can tell you it's only here, then you are not to look over there. So again, we have a ton of people making $90,000 a year that are driving around our communities psychologically assassinating people. Then we have another group making $180,000 a year doing it. Then we have another group making $500,000 a year. That is what Kroll is. Kroll was assassinating U.S. citizens in Hollywood for the deep state in the name of Harvey Weinstein. And Kroll is working, was at least, and probably still is, FBI cases, DOJ cases, DHS cases. It's the same people. Don't let them tell you it's something else. They won't let anybody but deep state in. That's what the story is with President Trump. He's not deep state, and they want him out, or at least occupied, while he's attempting to fix what's broken. So again, the president's efforts are the president's efforts. He's well within the Constitution and the law. The problem is the DOJ, the FBI, the DHS have cells of criminal enterprise. And most likely Director Wray is corrupt. This idea where he's a Politburo member that gets to keep his office for 10 years, it's unheard of. If you're appointed for 10 years, that means you can't exceed 10 years. It doesn't mean that you get to stay one day. We have to fix that. We have to take back the Senate and the House, or the House at least, and hopefully the senators are behind it, and we can change things. Impeachment, you need a supermajority. You need to change that. A simple majority, if I'm correct, it's a simple majority. That if the president's impeached, it's because they can, not because of any fact. If the Democrats impeach President Trump, it's because they have a majority, which shows you a simple majority cannot be allowed to do that. We need to change some of these laws. We need to have specific wording that tells the FBI director that he is an employee of the United States and that he can be terminated any day. It has to say that specifically. You are not guaranteed more than 1 minute of service. Write that into it, because they're that ignorant. They're that criminal. They're that horrific. They're that anti-American. And again, praise God in all that you do. Praise God.
Listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio.